Hello everyone, this is Whitney Will from Astrology, and I am here today to talk about your fourth quarter mooncast. So that begins on the fourth quarter of the moon, which will happen at roughly midnight on June 12th and last until our solar eclipse on June 21st. So I'm just going to talk about the transits that will happen in that time, kind of what we can expect, kind of, the first week of June was a huge week. The last week of June is also going to be a big week, but we definitely have stuff going on in the fourth quarter as well. So to start off, we have the tail end of the moon in Pisces, which is how we get the fourth quarter, right? So we have the moon in Pisces approaching the sun in Gemini, and they form a 90-degree angle. Those two signs are both mutable and they square each other, and so we have the fourth quarter. The fourth quarter is really a time for integration, and boy, do we need it. So the energy is dropping because the moon is waning, and so we'll kind of see maybe a drop in some of the urgency and some of the intensity that we saw around the full moon, especially because it was an eclipse. So don't worry, we're not losing momentum in the things that got started. In fact, they are just getting started, and the dismantling, because we had a full moon eclipse, is just getting started, and I imagine that we will see that through this entire eclipse cycle, which will last about 2 years. So, just in terms of our weekly stuff, the energy is dropping, moving towards the new moon on the 21st, which will also be an eclipse, and start some things off, and we'll get to that at the end. So, so we have the fourth quarter that basically happens just after midnight Mountain Time on the 13th. And then we also have on Saturday the exact moment of the Mars-Neptune conjunction. And so when Mars and Neptune come together, as with all archetypal things, it can manifest in a few different ways. It's going to look different for you or for somebody else. It's going to look different on the personal and on the collective levels. So what have we got? We have Mars, the warrior, our initiative, our assertiveness, our energy, our where we do battle, in the sign of Pisces. So we're talking about spiritual and collective topics, and then it's conjoining kind of the master of these, the point where the individual dissolves into the collective, where the particular becomes the universal, and that's Neptune. And so, right, it can either be, right, we can see that in a few ways. We can see our will being reflected in the collective. We can feel the call from the collective to engage our will. But Neptune dissolves, and Mars has a lot of our animal stamina. So we can also feel totally depleted. Like somehow we don't know, the collective is kind of zapping your will. And that, in the emotional sign of Pisces, that can be you are just riding the waves of the emotional collective. And if that feels like too much, then Mars kind of has the answer. Try to get the energy back in your body. So Mars is action and exercise. So if you're feeling depleted, as much as you don't want to move your body, even if it's just a walk around the block. If you're feeling totally overwhelmed with the issues and the problems in the world, do one little thing. These transits pass, and we've got Mars right there with Neptune, and it will start moving off of that. We've just kind of escaped Neptune's square with Venus. Venus has now backed off enough that we have a little bit less confusion about what we want and what we value, but with Mars conjunct Neptune, we may not be sure about what to do about that. And so open yourself up, take tiny actions, even if you feel like you are responsible for everything, which Mars can kind of feel the burden of this big collective dream, and like it has a divine imperative to make it happen. Yeah. And with the moon in Pisces kind of holds that too. So it's kind of like swimming through the soupy land of Pisces as well. I know. Moon in Pisces is emotion time for me in the month. I have a Virgo moon. It likes things organized. It likes things figured out. It likes plans. For some reason, when the moon gets into Pisces, everything just feels a little bit overwhelming. So, yeah. So take care of yourselves. Prayer helps. When you can, whoever it is you pray to, surrender your stuff to whatever is beyond you. And then the moon is going to move into Aries. So that happens at 3 p.m. Mountain Time on Saturday the 13th. And so there we can kind of get our action back. But again, we still have Mars conjunct Neptune. So now Mars, that is now the ruler of the moon in Aries, still doesn't know what to do. So we're going to feel like we have to do stuff, possibly not really know what it is. Also, the moon is waning, which is kind of antithetical to the Aries vibe. So it's a little bit of a more mature moon, because it's a fourth quarter, it's heading back towards the sun, it's kind of in its elderly composting, learn the lessons phase. Yeah. And so I think that it's just kind of a little bit of a contradiction of terms that can get a little bit irritating, especially probably on Saturday when the moon is just into Aries, because it will still be kind of making that square with the sun, and there's a lot of tension there. So we've got Aries, tension, Gemini is going to be like, I have 1,000 ideas of what we could do. And Mars is going to be like, yeah, but I'm in this Neptune cloud, receiving the visions. So trust your intuition on that one is probably a good way to go. Then we've got the moon moving through Aries over the next few days until Tuesday. So it's going to do all of the stuff that it does while it's in cardinal signs. And so that is squaring Pluto and Jupiter, conjoining Chiron, sextiling all of our Gemini friends, squaring Mercury in Cancer. And I will try to post daily updates on my Instagram if you're interested in when those minor aspects occur, just to get a feel for it. Then on Tuesday, early, first thing in the morning before any of us are awake, the moon goes into Taurus. And so I think that is much more harmonious with the moon's waning phase. We're getting down to the nub of it when it's in Taurus, approaching its balsamic phase, which is the sleepiest phase of the moon. And the moon in Taurus is really about really kind of basic creature comforts and self-care. So staying close to home, making sure you're eating well, really using that time to restore yourself and restore the equilibrium and the serenity of Taurus, so that you can kind of come into the new moon eclipse, our last solar eclipse in Cancer, for the next 9 years or so until the nodes are back in there. And really kind of come into it from a grounded place. On Wednesday, which is Mercury's day, Mercury is going to station retrograde in Cancer. And so we are going to experience collectively Mercury in retrograde in Cancer. And so we've got a whole bunch of planets retrograde. And actually, did I miss someone? No, Neptune doesn't go retrograde till the 22nd. Okay. There's a little Mercury retrograde hiccup. So we have a whole bunch of planets retrograde. We've got Venus retrograde until next week. We have Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter, we're going to have Neptune. And so there's a whole bunch of reconsideration happening, and Mercury is just going to help us integrate that. Mercury retrograding through Cancer while we have our last solar eclipse of the Cancer Capricorn eclipse cycle is kind of beautiful because it has this moment of really being able to go over what we've learned so far with the North Node in Cancer. Now, the North Node in Cancer is about, how do we experience family? How do we experience tribe? How do we feel safe? Not just materially, which is maybe more Capricorn, but how do we feel emotionally safe? What's our relationship with our belonging? And so it'll be the shadows of that too. So, right, what are the shadows of tribalism? Obviously, where we're so afraid of the outsider or the other side of the political position, where we are so afraid of other people's emotions because we're afraid that they are going to dominate us. So we get this time while Mercury is retrograde until July 12th to kind of go over some of that stuff and try and integrate stuff, reevaluate our ideas, because this is Mercury, this is about what we think, this is about how we communicate, and it's in the sign of Cancer. Also, we're taking down a bunch of statues and a bunch of history. Cancer is very nostalgic, and so all of people's emotional attachments to those things getting brought up right around here is really appropriate. And people's emotional attachments to those things being taken down because of what they represent. So there's both sides of that. We are kind of redeciding, going over what is important to our identity and how, when we put up these symbols, what that means for us as a culture. And so now when we take them down, what that means for us as well. But we can also see a bunch of the normal Mercury retrograde shenanigans. So that's going to be having to redo stuff and not being able to move forward as quickly as we thought. Things not being as straightforward as we would like them to be. And we have Mercury in a water sign, so that's kind of overemphasized. What it is a really good time for is imagination. So imagining the world that is possible, imagining a world where people feel safer emotionally and physically, and what do we do to put that into place, and how do we put how do we make choices as individuals and as communities and as a country about those things. So I'm excited about that. I love Mercury retrograde. I think it's a great time that we all just kind of go inward and figure that out. And so that's going to be some precious time also before the new moon to really honor the beginning of Mercury retrograde, which can be a little bit rockier than the end. And like I said, Mercury will be retrograde until the 12th of July, and it will conjoin the sun, so we'll have kind of our moment of insight on June 30th, and there's a bunch of stuff going on that week, so that will be really a nice thing to take advantage of. So on the 18th, we have Mars sextile Pluto, so it's moving through Pisces. Pisces sextiles Capricorn, so when a planet spends time there, we're going to work through the sextile between those two signs. So Mars sextiles Pluto, it's going to get all the juice of the Plutonian themes, which are, all of this collective change, the shadow of our Capricornian culture is going to come up. There could be some intense things that happen right around then in terms of politics and the protests. And then the moon is going to go into Gemini. So going from the moon in Taurus, which is kind of stay home, recuperate a little bit, make sure that your body is doing okay, to Gemini, okay, rejoin the polis, rejoin the conversation, the ideas kind of take flight. a little bit, but it's a balsamic moon. So the balsamic moon is the last phase of the moon, and that is like the grandmother moon. She moves slowly. There's a sweetness, but there's not a lot of energy to it. And so I find always during the balsamic phase of the moon, people are like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired. Why am I so tired? There's not this tension. We're at the very end of the lunar cycle, and there's not a lot of energy left. And so that's, so it's not the like Gemini patio cocktail party. It's kind of like the Gemini collect your thoughts, especially because the ruler of Gemini, Mercury, is retrograde. So there is this collect your thoughts. And then the weekend we'll have an eclipse. So on the 20th, which is the solstice, the sun moves into Cancer. Yay, Cancer season. So we've moved on from a very exciting, very active Gemini season into Cancer season, and we'll get kind of more into that when I do the new moon weekly cast. And then we have Mars sextile Jupiter, so big juice. We're not losing momentum on action. In fact, yeah, that'll juice Mars right up, ready to go into Aries, where we'll spend the next 7 months making shit happen and then being frustrated by it during a retrograde. That will happen in the fall, but we'll get to that. So, as always with astrology, there's all these cycles and they overlap with each other, so that there's always points where there's activity and there's always points where there is rest, and how that affects you specifically is going to depend on your individual chart. And then on the 21st, we have our new moon in Cancer that happens at 0 degrees Cancer. On the solstice point, it is our final solar eclipse in Cancer, like I said, for the Cancer Capricorn eclipse cycle. It's been going on for about 18 months, 2 years. It's a North Node eclipse. North Node eclipses bring in more, whereas South Node solar eclipses are kind of this releasing to make space. And so, and also it's in, as I said, it's at 0 degrees Cancer, which is the very beginning of Cancer. And so with the signs in the very beginning, we see kind of like the rawest form. So I think, eclipses have 6 months to take effect. I think we'll see, both sides of the very raw Cancer archetype. We will see in our own lives and in the collective, people making room for more belonging, people promoting more empathy, more understanding, caring, and being more aware about how different people feel about things. I think we will also see more kind of insulation when people feel afraid. They kind of put up walls around their little tribe. And when, Cancer can have such squishy insides because it has a hard shell around it. So I think we will see that too. But new stuff on the horizon, and where Cancer falls in your chart, you've been on a little journey rebalancing how that energy has presence in your life. And so feel free to share what that journey has been for you. For me, it's been really powerful. Cancer is my South Node. It's my 6th house of my body. And during the Cancer Capricorn eclipses, I've kind of definitely experienced my body in a new way because I'm pregnant. Got some Cancer themes going on, creating family, and it's been really redemptive and powerful and healing So I'm really grateful for that, but also really, really happy to see the North Node in Gemini and us all getting a little bit more curious and engaging in conversations and questioning our Sagittarian creeds. So that's what I have for you this week. Let me know if you have any questions. As always, you can find me at my website, starheartastrology.com, and on my Instagram at starheartastrology. Thank you.